Hello, welcome to the first part of a series of videos that I'm going to be putting out this week where I break down all the fights taking place at UFC 235 from a betting perspective. Now, March is an absolutely massive month for betting on MMA. In the next 5 weeks, we've got 5 UFC events and 2 Bellator events. So tons of fights coming up, tons of fights to break down and tons of opportunities to make some money. So if you do like these videos that I'm putting out, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If I get 50 likes on this video and every other video that I put out this week, I will do a bonus live stream video on Friday or Saturday where I look for some decent prop bets on all the fights taking place this weekend, and I'll also do a live Q&A where I answer your questions during the video. So if you'd like me to do that live stream on Friday or Saturday, please hit the thumbs up and I will be sure to do it. And please also like all the videos that I put out for the rest of the week. If I get 50 on all of them, we will do that live stream. Now, with the sheer number of fights coming up, we've had 4 consecutive weekends now with UFC events. We've also had 2 consecutive weekends with Bellator events. And like I just said, in the next 5 weeks, we've got 7 major MMA events. And under the weight of the amount of fights coming up, I'm starting to see some signs that the betting sites and the odds makers are struggling to cap all these fights accurately. Lately, we're just seeing some crazy odds being thrown up. You know, just last week, I did recommend a small 1-unit bet on Shek Congo to beat Vitaly Minakov. You can go back in my channel and check out the video where I broke this fight down on the Bellator video, the Bellator 2 and 6 video. And I basically describe in that video the reasons why I thought Shek Congo was a good bet and why I thought the odds were way off. He ended up winning, and obviously that was a massive, massive profit, you know, with Congo being a huge underdog. Now on this card, I believe I've already found another really decent underdog bet similar to Congo, and I really think the bookies have made a massive mistake setting the odds on this fight. So the fight that I am talking about is Diego Sanchez against Mickey Gall. Now, Diego Sanchez is currently a very, very big underdog. If we pop his odds into the implied probability calculator, call it an average of around about 3.70 at the moment, you can see that the current implied probability on his odds is just 27%. So right now the bookies are only giving him a 27% chance of beating Mickey Gall. Now if we put Mickey Gall's odds into the odds implied probability calculator, you can see that he's currently around about a 1.30 favourite, giving him an implied probability of 77%. So that means that the betting sites and the odds makers currently believe Mickey Gall beats Diego Sanchez 77% of the time, which if you just take a couple of hours out of your day to research this fight and study footage of both guys, you would see is absolute madness. So the Shek Congo fight last week was a good example of how the bookies are kind of screwing up, and I do believe that win or lose, whether Diego Sanchez wins or loses this fight, I believe that the odds are way off. And that's a really important point, guys. Remember that just because a bet loses doesn't mean it was a bad bet. Just because a bet wins doesn't mean it was a good bet. You have to look at the implied probability, how much value you're getting in the odds, and whether the risk is worth the reward. And in this instance, I definitely believe that a bet on Diego Sanchez, I definitely believe that the risk is worth the reward. So if we look at Diego Sanchez's record, obviously, he's 37 years old now, and he's definitely on a steep decline. There's absolutely no denying that. He's not as fast as he used to be. His chin is not where he used to be, and his reflexes just aren't as sharp anymore. But the one thing that Diego Sanchez still does great is wrestle, and he's got an extremely heavy top game and a very, very technical ground game. Diego Sanchez, one of the reasons why he's on such a steep decline at the moment, not only is it because of his age that he's 37 years old, but he's also had almost 40 pro fights. But within that time, if you go back through Diego Sanchez's record, Diego in 40 pro fights or 39 pro fights has never been submitted in 40 pro fights, which is unreal, absolutely unbelievable when you consider that since 2004, the last 15 years, Diego has been consistently competing against some of the best fighters in the world in the UFC. Check his record, guys, has never been submitted in 39 pro fights. So that would mean if the bookies have set the odds where they believe to be accurately on this fight, they believe that Mickey Gall's either going to win this fight by submission, win this fight by knockout or submit Diego, or he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu phenom that's going to be able to submit Diego and do something that no one else has ever been able to do. Higher level grapplers than Mickey Gall. So Mickey Gall's obviously got a lot of hype behind him. He's quite highly rated. You know, he's a great talker, and obviously public perception and popularity has weighed into the odds here, because if you match these guys up skill for skill and look at what they bring to the table in terms of how good they actually are in the octagon, he definitely doesn't deserve to be this big of a favourite. If you want to see for yourself why Diego Sanchez is such a good bet here at underdog odds, just go and watch Mickey Gall's fight against Randy Brown, and to some extent watch some of the mistakes he made against Sage Northcutt, and then go and watch what Diego Sanchez did to Craig White and Marcin Held. Now, Mickey Gall is primarily a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu based fighter. He's a BJJ practitioner. He obviously is training and working on his striking and wrestling, but right now that's his bread and butter. Right now that is his base. And the problem with being a pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu based fighter is that you're very happy to fight off your back. If you go and watch Mickey Gall's fight against Randy Brown, you'll see that his takedown defense is very, very poor. He almost does what Fabrizio Verdun does, in that Mickey Gall wants to be on the ground with his opponents so badly because that's where he feels comfortable, that even when he was struggling on the ground against Randy Brown and the fight got back to his feet, Randy Brown would only have to shoot a half-assed takedown attempt, and Mickey Gall would fall to his back like Fabrizio Verdun does to try and bait Randy Brown into going to the ground with him. And Randy Brown did go to the ground with him and dominated the fight from top position. What that fight showed was that Mickey Gall has got dangerous submissions in his locker, but he's a very, very poor MMA grappler. If you go back and watch that fight, you'll see that Mickey Gall was completely ineffective off his back, and he also didn't really understand how to work his way back to his feet or improve his position when on the ground. Now, Mickey Gall is very dangerous with submissions. He takes the back of his opponent faster than most other guys, almost anyone else, in fact, that I've seen in the welterweight division. But then again, the level of competition that he's been facing isn't great. Now that he's going to start to go up a level and face more skilled grapplers like Diego Sanchez, I really think he's going to struggle. Now, Diego Sanchez, yes, he's old. Yes, his chin is shot. Yes, his reflexes aren't what they used to be. But he's still a very strong grappler. Still has a very powerful reactive double leg takedown. Still has the power and explosion to pick his opponents up and slam them to the ground. And he also has legendary cardio. The cardio to grind on his opponents and work for takedowns for 15 minutes. So I believe, with Mickey Gall's takedown defense being so bad, and with him being so ineffective off his back, and with him having no idea how to stand back up and work his way back to his feet when he is taken down, I believe that Diego Sanchez will use the same strategy he used to beat Craig White in his last fight, and he will put Mickey Gall on his back and grind on him for 3 rounds and basically dominate the fight. I don't see Mickey Gall causing Diego Sanchez any problems off his back. Diego Sanchez's top game is too strong, his submission defense is too good, and another thing that Diego does great is that he's very active from top position. He never gives up position chasing long shot submissions, but he does keep the ground and pound going, and he remains active enough so that it becomes impossible for the referee to stand him up. Now, if this fight stays standing, which I very much doubt it will because both guys will want this on the ground, I do give Diego an advantage because, again, if you go back and watch Mickey Gall's fight against Randy Brown, you'll see that he's very, very nervous in the exchanges. Against Randy Brown, you'll see him turning his head away from Brown, turning his back to Brown, and also at brief moments actually running away from Brown, Alistair Overeem style, which are all signs of an inexperienced striker that is reluctant to engage and nervous to engage. Now, it's very, very possible that that could change. Mickey Gall is currently training with Joe Schilling, so he's obviously trying to tighten up his striking, make big improvements to his striking. But based on Mickey Gall's last few fights, I don't believe he has the takedown defense to prevent Diego from taking him down and dominating from top position. And I also don't believe, based on what I've seen, that Mickey Gall really has the power or the striking to hurt Sanchez. Obviously, Sanchez, his chin is shot at this stage in his career. It's possible Mickey Gall could get a flash KO, but it's extremely unlikely. And given the odds, with Diego currently being a really big underdog, the odds are around 3.70, I believe the risk is definitely worth reward. If I was capping this fight, I would cap Diego closer to 60 to 70% chance of winning this fight, which means either I'm horribly wrong about this fight or the bookies are horribly wrong about this fight. But based on the way that they capped the Shetkongo-Vitaly Minikov fight, I'm willing to take the chances that I've got this one right. And if you are on the fence and you're not sure, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go and check out Diego's fights against Craig White and Marcin Held, and then go and check out Mickey Gall's fight against Randy Brown. So that is it, guys. On to the next one. So the next fight that I want to talk about is Edmund Shahbazyan against Charles Byrd. So let's just close these down and jump into this next fight. So, like I said to you guys, the way that I approach researching every card is when every Monday before a new UFC event, I sit down at my desk Monday morning after taking the little man to school, and I scan through all the fights and I pick out where I think the best betting opportunities might be, and I try and research the fights before the odds change too much. So Diego Sanchez was literally the first name that jumped out at me, and straight away after an hour or two of research, I knew he was an excellent bet. And one of the next names that jumped out at me was Edmund Shahbazyan, because of how good he looked in his UFC debut against Darren Stewart, which is interesting because Charles Byrd and Edmund Shahbazyan actually share a common opponent in Darren Stewart. Shahbazyan fought Stewart in his UFC debut, and Charles Byrd fought Stewart in his last fight. So at 21 years old, I was massively, massively, massively impressed in what Edmund Shahbazyan was able to do against Darren Stewart and how good he looked. You know, he's very young, very inexperienced, making his UFC debut against a guy like Darren Stewart that doesn't give you any time to settle. Stewart's very aggressive, hits hard, fights at a high pace, and yet Shahbazyan came out in his UFC debut fought at a relentless pace for 15 minutes, showed great cardio, great fight IQ, and great skills, and I was super, super, super impressed with him. And when I went back and watched this fight again earlier on today, I was even more impressed by his performance against Darren Stewart. And I really think that he could be a good bet against Charles Byrd. Now, before we talk about how these guys match up stylistically, let's again look at the odds. So currently you can see that the odds on Shahbazyan do appear to be improving. He was around about a 1.67 favourite yesterday. He's now improved up to around about 1.77. So if we pop that into the implied probability calculator, that gives him an implied probability of around about 57%. Compared to Charles Byrd, if we look at his odds, currently around about, call it an average of 2.10, which would give him an implied probability of 48%. So this is roughly a 60-40 fight in favour of Shahbazyan. Now, when I went back and watched Charles Byrd's fight, Charles Byrd's past fights, God, that's a bit of a tongue twister. One thing that I noticed was that even though he's primarily a grappler, his takedown defense is poor, and when he's defending takedowns, he gives his back up, and when he is working his way back to his feet, he also gives his back up. And then if you go and watch Edmund Shahbazyan's fight against Darren Stewart, you'll notice that he does an excellent job of taking the back and an excellent job of controlling his opponent from back position. So a good example of a fighter that used this technique was just a couple of weeks ago. We saw Nick Lentz really dominate the majority of the first and second round of his fight against Scott Holtzman by controlling Holtzman's back. It's a technique that Khabib Nurmagomedov uses a lot as well to chain into other takedown attempts before getting his opponent down. And I was really, really impressed with Shahbazyan's ability to control Stewart's back. And when he actually finally did manage to get hooks in on Stewart, he managed to get a body triangle in play very quickly and showed excellent back control. So Byrd's biggest weakness when it comes to grappling is giving up his back, and Shahbazyan's biggest strength in grappling appears to be taking his opponent's back and maintaining back control. Now, Shahbazyan obviously hasn't fought a very high level of opponent. His record is super padded, and most of these fights before he competed in the UFC aren't available to watch. So I am making a lot of assumptions on Shahbazyan, but in terms of the technique that I saw him use against Stewart, I was really, really impressed by him. And I do think that he's a good matchup against a bad matchup, sorry, for Byrd based on that. Because the thing that cost Byrd in this fight, Byrd was doing quite well against Darren Stewart, but he also gassed out around about the halfway mark of round 2. Whereas Shahbazyan fought at a crazy pace against Stewart for 3 rounds. It went the distance and didn't really slow down that much at all. So if these guys get into a crazy grappling exchange in round 1, which I expect them to do because they're both primarily grapplers, even if early on Charles Byrd starts to get the better of the grappling exchanges, which I don't expect him to do because his takedown defense is poor and he gives his back up a lot, but even if he did get the better of the ground exchanges, maybe Shahbazyan slips or gives up a weak takedown and Byrd has a period of top control. As long as Shahbazyan can make Byrd work, I do think he has a great chance of winning the fight, because I do expect Byrd to slow down as the fight goes on. Obviously, he's a short, compact, muscular guy. So that is definitely something to think about, guys. What I would say about this fight, though, from a betting perspective, fights like this you have to be really intelligent with. Just on last week's breakdown videos where I favoured Thiago Santos to beat Jan Blachowicz and I favoured Paulo Reyes to beat Damir Hadzovic. Both those guys were roughly about the same odds. They were slight, tiny favourites, around about 1.91 to 2.0, depending on what odds you got them in at, depending on what stage of the week you bet them. But if you would have bet on Santos and Reyes last week, you would have roughly ended up at around about break even. And I slightly favoured both of those guys. I wasn't mega confident in either, but I did slightly favour both. And there was a tiny little bit of value on the odds on both guys. That's where you've got to be careful when it comes to betting on guys like Shahbazyan. Now, what I would say is that I cap Shahbazyan at around about a 60 to 65% chance of winning this fight, which means at his current odds, there's not really that much value there at all. His current odds carry an implied probability of 57%. So, similar to Paulo Reyes and similar to Thiago Santos last week, at the moment is probably a pass, but is very, very borderline, is close. With guys like this, it's important to keep an eye on how the odds move, because as we can see, in the last 24 hours, Shahbazyan's odds have improved from 1.67, which would have been a total pass, giving him an implied probability of bang on 60%, down, and they've improved a little bit to 57%, which, again, there's a little bit of value there, but not as much as I'd like. The problem with bets like this, where you're only getting a tiny marginal amount of value, is that you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. You introduce a lot of variance into your bets and you can have a lot of huge swings. And it's really important when you're growing your bankroll and growing your money with compounded growth, you try to keep losses to a minimum. So try to avoid putting your money in situations where you only have a marginal edge on the bookie. Try and get a little bit more juice and value in the odds if you can. So the point I'm trying to make is, at the moment, at these odds, Shahbazyan is a borderline bet for me. Probably a pass. However, if in the next few days we see his odds continue to improve, keep an eye on them and he could be worth a bet, because he's already gone from 1.67 to 1.77 in 24 hours. If he continues to improve up to maybe 1.87 or better, that would give him an implied probability of 53%, and at that point, with me capping him at around 60%, that gives you a nice 6.5% to 7% edge on the bookies, and at that point he would become a good bet. So I do think Shahbazyan could be a good bet this weekend, guys, but it depends on what odds he gets to. Keep an eye on the odds. It's all about the odds. It's all about value. And my leans on Thiago Santos and Paulo Reyes last weekend, like I say, were a good example of that, because they went 1-1 and you would have ended up break even or at a slight loss. So that is that fight, guys. We move on to the next one, which usually, when I'm talking about a main event fight, I would usually say this is the fight that everyone's going to be interested in this week. Of course, I'm talking about Anthony Smith versus John Jones in the main event, but let's be real, I'm not sure if anyone is that interested in this fight, because, to be honest with you, it is a little bit of a squash match. You don't see many squash matches in the UFC, but I would be amazed if Anthony Smith won this fight, to be honest with you. I don't want to waste your time and drag this video on for any longer than it needs to be, but aside from a puncher's chance, I really don't give Anthony Smith any chance of winning this fight. Now, a lot of pundits, a lot of analysts have made the point that this will be the first time in a long time where Jon Jones is facing a guy that's, you know, a similar size to him, so we won't have a size advantage. I think Jones is slightly taller than Alexander Gustafsson, but both Jones and Smith are 6'4". Now, the problem with that is, even though Smith is a tall guy at 6'4", he actually has an abnormally short reach for someone that tall. His reach is only 76 inches long, and Jon Jones has an 84.5 inch reach, which means that Jon Jones actually has 8.5 inches of reach, even though they are the same height, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But what it does mean is that Jones still has a huge reach advantage over Anthony Smith. He should still be able to fight long like he's able to do against most of his shorter opponents, and it means that Jon Jones can hit Smith from positions where Smith cannot counter. Now, if we just take a look at the betting odds on this fight, just want to refresh the page because they've declined quite a bit already today. So the current odds, the best you can get on Jones at the moment, around about 1.12, which give him an implied probability of 89%. And I think that's pretty accurate, to be honest with you. You know, when you factor in bad judging, the potential that Jon Jones comes in with an injury or has a bad weight cut or injures himself in the fight, you know, giving Smith a 10% margin, or a 10% chance of winning this fight is fair. But I also think giving Jones a 90% chance of winning this fight is fair, because he is significantly better than Smith everywhere. Massive advantages everywhere. Now, if we look at the odds on Smith, you can get him up to around 8.0 on some sites, I guess, but the average is around about 6.70, which gives him an implied probability of 15%. I think that's generous, guys. There's no value on Smith here. I would not give him a 15% chance of winning. I do think Jon Jones wrecks him, to be honest with you. Now, the problem is, not only can Jon Jones outstrike Smith in this fight and dominate the striking exchanges, but Anthony Smith's biggest weakness has always been his takedown defense. He has very bad takedown defense, which, you know, a lot of long, tall guys do. And on the ground, on his back, he's very ineffective on the ground. And also, he really struggles to work his way back to his feet. And we saw, we've seen Jon Jones take Daniel Cormier down, who's obviously an Olympic level wrestler. And we also seen him put Alexander Gustafsson on his back in his last fight and finish Gustafsson on the ground very quickly. And Alexander Gustafsson has legendary takedown defense. He's extremely difficult to take down. If Jones can take down Gustafsson, you can bet your ass he can take Smith down and dominate him. So with this fight, I just expect Jones to dominate the fight everywhere. And aside from Smith landing, you know, a Hail Mary flash KO, I don't really give him any chance. And the problem with this fight is that Smith is going to have to one-shot kill Jones. Because if at any point in the fight, Smith manages to start causing Jones problems with the stand-up and starts to hurt him with strikes, at any point in time, Jones can just shoot a double leg takedown, put Smith on his back, and dominate the fight from top position, and probably get quite a quick finish with ground and pounds. So like I say, Smith's not very good at defending himself on the ground, and his takedown defense is extremely poor. Jones should be able to get him down easily. So that is that for that fight, guys. I would definitely pass on the main event. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back tomorrow with another video where I break down another 3 fights taking place this weekend at UFC 235. And if you'd like me to do a bonus live stream video on Friday or Saturday where I hunt for decent value prop bets on every fight taking place this weekend, and where I also do a live Q&A answering all your questions about the fights taking place this weekend, please hit the like button below. And if every video that I get this week gets 50 likes, I will do that video. And also, please subscribe. Nice one, guys. Love you. I'll see you tomorrow.